Hello, and welcome, campfire gatherers, and welcome, everybody who is joining me from Lexiibat's stream for this wonderful episode of Transition Stories. This is season 3, episode 5, and I am Phoebe J. Rose, and my guest tonight is... Say hello, Lexi.
I'm Alex, or Lexi, or Lex, depending on what you want to call me. I don't really care. Providing it's not my dead name, I don't give a fucking fuck.
In the words of Vinnie Jones in Snatch, you can call me Susan if you like, just not that.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So yes, I am Phoebe J. Rose, and I am the inimitable host and the lighter of the campfire that is Transition Stories. I am a transman, for those of you who don't know. I'm also British, and if you couldn't tell that I was British, then you need to, watch some... having a test and, eat some cucumber sandwiches. So, Lex, Alex, however we're going to refer to you tonight, why don't you let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
I am Alex. I'm an Irish trans, mostly man. I refer to myself as a demi-boy or a non-binary man, and I use he, they pronouns. I live in the UK. I have done for about a decade.
I extend my condolences.
It was better when I arrived than it fucking is now, like considerably better. For a start, like the hatred of trans people wasn't as fucking open.
No, we had a government that sounded like they were doing the right things, and then it kind of went.
Yeah. And I moved over to get away from reams of trauma and abuse and familial problems and various other shit. I'm a parent to 2 kids. Yes, I carried and birthed them both. I am their mother, despite not being a woman. Doesn't matter, they're not synonyms.
Despite however many times that we will argue on Twitterdoms about the term mother, it does not matter in reality, because if you call yourself a mother, then you are the mother as far as I'm concerned. If I call myself a mother, then I am the mother. If you are a trans man and you have carried a pregnancy and you want to refer to yourself as the father, then that is entirely your choice.
Yeah, I'm still with their dad, so they have a father. They have a father that's in their life. They have a father who is a very good father. They don't need 2 fathers. Do you know what I mean? Like, I am their mama. They call me mama because mama comes from, like, the origin of the word mama comes from milk giver.
I'm learning tonight. I did not know that. Well, there you go. And I have an agriculture degree, so I really should have known that.
It's like a really fucking old Latin or ancient Greek word, like old dead language it comes from. But yeah, it's interesting, and I like the sound of it. I like the maternalness to it, even if I'm, not a woman. I'm still maternal. I still carried and birthed them, But with where I am, I don't have access currently, plus with the waiting times, on the NHS to transition. So I cannot actually transition, no matter how much I fucking want to, until I'm at a point where I am not only financially stable, but more than comfortable.
And I hear this from a lot of people about the NHS. And don't get me wrong, National Health Service is a wonderful organisation that provides free at the point of care medical assistance and medical care to those who need it. But if you're a trans person in the United Kingdom, waiting lists are years long, and I mean years long. And it is not...
About 10 years now.
Last time I checked, I saw that it was 7 years. To hear it is 10 years makes me want to scream.
Yeah,
so, at this point, it is systematic and it is deliberate. At this point, it's not one of those things where you're going, oh, hang on a minute, I decided that I was going to make a system that was as good as possible. This is just how it is. No, this is intentional. Centralized gender identity clinics are not great as an idea.
the thing is, it's not just the gender identity clinics either, right? A huge amount of the underfunding is affecting the gender clinics, yes. But the underfunding broadly has been a big problem since just after just after David Cameron came into government. Like a big problem. You can see it in mental health care, you can see it in the waiting lists even for physical, like non-urgent care. You can see it in the waiting times in A&E. The average waiting time around the country, the last I looked, since the start of the pandemic, is 6 hours. And the thing is, what they do in terms of funding, right? They will set a target for a hospital accident and emergency room to reach, like, see a patient within 4 hours. And depending on how before or after that they actually see a patient is what their funding levels are based on. So if they are late seeing a patient, they get their funding cut because they're not meeting their targets. As opposed to the Tories going, let's maybe up their funding because they're not reaching their targets because they're fucking understaffed. Because that makes perfect fucking sense, doesn't it?
It's round the bend. It's like the university quotas they used to have. So if you went over a quota for the number of students to have on a university place, you not only lost the funding for that student, but you then had funding for one other student taken away as well. So you lost 2 places for every extra student you took on.
It's madness.
Absolute madness. But we're not here to talk about the intricacies of how broken the National Health Service is in the United Kingdom. We're here to talk about yourself and your journey and your transition. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. What year would you say that you commenced your transition to the wider world, and what year would you say you commenced your transition to yourself?
This is a really hard question to answer, right? Because my upbringing was west of Ireland, super Catholic, like super conservative. I was surrounded by fields, farmers, and fuck all else. Like, even being out as bi, I was the only queer person that me or any of my classmates or teachers knew in the whole county. So exploring gender wasn't an option. I remember telling my mother at the age of 5 or 6, I don't want to be a girl. I don't feel like I'm a girl. That doesn't feel right. And mum kind of shrugged it off because, like, every kid has a moment of, like, I want to be like this sibling or that sibling or whatever. And I have 3 brothers. And I was always closer with my brothers than I was my sister because there's such a huge age gap between me and my sister. Whereas I've got, like, a little brother who's not that much younger than me. And, like, an older brother who's 8 years older than me. And then I have an older sister who's, like, 13 years or 14 years older than me. And then another older brother who's, like, a year older than her again. So, like, there's 5 of us. So a lot of it was, oh, well, Alex, as I am now, is probably just a tomboy like I was as a kid. It was, like, my mum's kind of thing, right? And I was, like, I leaned heavily into the tomboy. I wore jeans, I ran around, I climbed trees, like, I threw stones, I cycled bikes, I lifted weights, like, growing up, even, like, as a teenager. I was working out, I was playing contact sport, like, all of that shit. But I was running 2 miles first thing in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning to dive into a freezing cold lake, to swim laps, to then run back for, like, my rugby training.
You're not as mad as I am. I like a good run in the mornings, but I don't jump into a lake. I have run into the sea before because I'm not a million miles away from the sea. But I do understand the appeal of that, refreshing morning, clear your head, get away from the world kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's incredibly good for toning your muscles up, like, particularly if you're a sports person. And, like, keeping yourself, like, fit. And I was pretty fit before I ended up, like, getting sick and blowing my knee out and having various injuries and what have you. So, like, I always kind of knew I didn't fit into girl. I never fit into what everyone expected I was supposed to be growing up, ever. I was a bookworm, I was a nerd, I was building computers, like old computers from like a very young age. I knew how to use DOS and command prompt from a very young age. I knew how to like take a computer apart and put it back together, and how to format and defrag and like all that shit that no one my age knew how to do, because we were only just starting to get computers.
Because the computer, for those of you who were born after, 1996, somebody who was born in like 1989, like I was, the computer was like this enormous desktop thing that you had the occasional game on it and a very basic word processor on it, and then gradually you'd write something in DOS or you'd write something in ASCII code. But if you were going beyond that, you were something special. You really were something special going beyond that.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, my dad was a computer teacher eventually once he got qualified. When I was little, and like he taught me all the ins and outs of like using DOS, using Excel even from like a super young age, and like running background commands in command prompt to get shit to work if it was broken. And like, I remember when my school got its first computers, I was already 9 or 10. When my primary school, like the primary school I had in Leitrim, like got its first computers, and I was the one that the teachers would call on to fix shit because they had no idea what the fuck they were doing. Like me, this like shithead little kid who fucking knew everything, right? I was always the one like doing the troubleshooting and being called out of class to go fix someone's fucking PC because it had broken down again. And the thing is, like, I didn't know, just to finish the sort of doodah here, I didn't know what trans was until I was in, like, properly, other than, like, the vague thing, like, the shit you saw on Ace Ventura and, like, that kind of shit, right? I didn't know any of that until I was in my sort of early to mid-20s. And I did some sort of vague research, and I was like, okay, well, fine, whatever makes people happy. Doesn't bother me, doesn't affect me, whatever. And then a little while before the pandemic happened, I started being more online because while I was pregnant on my son, I couldn't go out much because I had really bad nerve pain, like around like my illness and the pregnancy, because he was resting like right on my sciatic nerve for a lot of the time. So I couldn't move around much because I was the size of a fucking beached whale, and I had shooting pains down my legs every time I tried. So I spent a lot of time, again, on the internet, as you do, especially if you're like our generation and you've got fuck all to do, right? And I ended up stumbling across like a lot of online spaces that spoke more about progressivism and what have you. And I've always been like a filthy leftist. I've always been an anarchist since I was like young, before I even knew what anarchism was. And I kind of discovered transness, and I discovered non-binary people. And I was like, well, I must be non-binary because I can't be this other thing because I was told I'm not able to be this other thing. And I initially came out as non-binary in 2019 while I was pregnant on my son. And then I thought about it more and more and more, especially going into the pandemic. And then I came out as like a dude, or like closer to dude than anything else, around the start of last year, end of the year before. It takes too fucking long.
So, just rolling back slightly, and some background for those of my viewers that won't fully appreciate Ireland. Can you just give a brief overview of what Catholic Western Atlantic coast Ireland is and was like?
Okay, so while I was growing up, the mother and baby homes had just already shut. The last
That's
mother and baby
scary.
home in Ireland shut in 1996, 3 years after I was born.
That's really scary to know.
Yeah.
That's really scary.
Despite this, I still had my grandmother threatening me with mother and baby homes from the age of 9. Like, that's how much I was shamed about my sexuality from a very, very young age. That was how much I was sexualized from a very, very young age. It also doesn't help that I was molested as a child. So there was all of that Catholic guilt and shame on top of the shame you get from being a victim to something like that you don't understand at a very young age. And it kind of melded together into this big ball of like Catholic guilt. And then I had my virginity stolen at 15 by an ex-boyfriend. And I went nuts, and I went hypersexual, and I went, fuck it, I will sleep with anything with a pulse. And I did.
Did that include, like vegetables and stuff? Because got some pulses that are like vegetables.
No, actual heart-beating pulse, like
not like broad beans and stuff. Jump into like a big vat of broad beans. Oh yeah, pulses!
But yeah, I've got a lot of like Christian trauma, particularly like around Catholicism and Pentecostal religions, but I'll get into that later. So like my nearest neighbor that was my age was about 2 miles away, 2.5 miles away. My nearest neighbor after that was my landlord, who was a mile away. And it was on his farm that we lived, so he'd be coming and going all hours of the day and night anyway. And it was very much like we could do whatever we want whenever we wanted, especially after my dad left, because dad was working all the time and mom was mostly depressed. That's most of what I can remember from like being young, was like mom struggling with her mental health and trying to deny it because dad was a prick, basically, and took advantage and neglected her and all sorts of shit. So like, yeah. I remember, so my mom was a stay-at-home mother, as was the time, as was expected. Like even in the 90s in Ireland, that was expected. When I was growing up, it was, you need to collect these. Oh, I think we lost Phoebe. Back. There we go.
Sorry about that. That will get cut out in post. I do apologise for that. That all went Pete Tong there. So please carry on.
Shit happens. Yeah, so I was brought up collecting things for a dowry to start out with. I was brought up with like, you need to, like at the age of 8, you need to pick out like the plates and mugs and stuff you want to take with you to your home with your husband when you're claimed, basically. Tablecloths and like decorations and like curtains and like all that kind of shit. I was taught that I needed to start collecting that really, really early, for one. For two, I was always taught, always, that I would grow up a bit. I might play the field a little bit, but that was frowned upon heavily. And then I would find a nice boy when I was 17 or 18. I'd settle down. I'd start pumping out kids.
And how did that affect you as the person then? And how does that affect you as the person today? And has that had an effect on how you view your own sense of identity and self?
So then I heavily went for a fuck you approach. And I did whatever I wanted anyway. And I would regularly, like, if my mum, not even my mum, but if my grandmother had, like, bought something, like, you should put this in your dowry, my response would be to chuck it across the yard and smash the plates or whatever. Like, I give no fucks. I give no fucks. Like, I lost track of the amount of times I bit my grandmother's head off for trying to pigeonhole me into a box. As a good Irish Catholic woman. Fuck that shit. And I was like, look, I would much rather go out there playing fucking swords, right? Or being taught by me dad how to wield a sword or fire a fucking bow than I would be fucking playing house with you for one day I might get fucking married to have children. And Jesus, the day I told her I liked women as well, she nearly had a fucking heart attack. Pity she didn't. Yeah, I'm not a fan of my grandmother, can you tell?
Just a tad. There may be some lingering issues regarding the relationship with your grandmother, for which
you want to know something ironic? She's my only grandparent left, and she is tits deep in dementia.
Oh. If you don't mind me asking, which kind
of
dementia is it? Is it progressive dementia? Is it Lewy body dementia? Or
it's progressive.
Progressive dementia.
Yeah. She doesn't even know who I fucking am, and she hasn't for about 5 years.
And does she ever have lucid moments where she does remember you? And if she does remember you, who does she remember you as?
Fucked if I know. I don't talk to half that side of the family anyway.
Fair enough. That's understandable. So, when you were the person, then you had a very much of a fuck you approach. How has that affected you today, and how does that impact on your expression of your own gender and gender identity?
I don't know if you've noticed while you've hung out in my chat, I very much give zero fucks about being abrasive. I am like a very to the point, abrupt, and abrasive person. And I'm okay with that. For some people it works and is necessary, and for me, I'm just one of those people it works for and is necessary for. You know? It protected me a lot through like a lot of shit that I needed to deal with, like trauma and stuff. So like there was very much and my mom had a lot of this as well. There was very much I will be who the fuck I am, whether you like it or not, and I will tell you the way it is, especially if you're being a fucking gobshite, and I give no shits. Like I don't care. I will just tell you the way it is.
And do you think that affected how you view your own sense of self and your own gender identity? Do you think that sense of I don't give a fuck allowed you a level of freedom with your own self to explore yourself as well?
No, because a lot of that I don't give a fuck was a defense mechanism. And the thing that was curled up in the middle of that defense mechanism was a fuck ton of Catholic guilt. So, like, even if I had known what trans was earlier and had the inclination to explore, I don't know if I'd have had the mental fortitude. Like, I didn't start exploring my gender until I was already a parent, you know?
And you say that you didn't start exploring until you were a parent. Do you think that the act of becoming a parent was a catalyst for that, or do you think that was just a coincidental moment in your life?
It was a catalyst for getting over a lot of shit I had to deal with. It was a catalyst for moving to a point in my life where I genuinely didn't give a fuck what people thought. And it was a catalyst for moving to a point where, okay, this is a person who relies on me wholeheartedly. And if I don't look after myself, I can't look after them.
And so when you did start to see the responsibilities that you had acquired in your life through parenthood and motherhood, how did that start to get you to view yourself? How did you look at yourself differently?
I always knew I was going to be a mum one day. Always. It was drummed into me from a very, very young age. Now, granted, I didn't settle down as early as everybody wanted me to. I was a couple of years off. And I didn't start pumping kids out as early as everybody wanted me to. I was a couple of years off for that as well. Because, like, I was told, you'll have your first kid by the time you're 20. And I was like, will I fuck? I had my daughter a month after I turned 22.
I would say that is a very Irish traditional attitude, because I say there's an Irish element to my family as well. And the stories that I've been told from my father were that from the Irish side, you were expected, if you were a boy, to go out and find a wife, get her pregnant, and you were supposed to have lots and lots and lots of kids as early and as many as you could, because that's the way that you do it.
Well, yeah, because for the longest time we were serfs.
Yeah.
We had to have children to work on the farms. And we had a
And
high
infant
mortality rate.
There we go. And infant mortality rates were through the ceiling. The Irish potato famine wasn't a thing that, came along and then everyone went, yeah, let's have lots of kids because, we can sustain them. No, let's have lots of kids because maybe 1 in 10 will survive.
Yeah.
And then we've got some kids.
And even then it was happening before that because we were so badly downtrodden by the British for so very long. Like Catholic, a lot of people don't realize this, like particularly English and American people. Catholic Irish people had our land confiscated.
Thanks, Cromwell.
Not even Cromwell before that.
Yeah, but he came along and he went pro, he did.
Cromwell tried to fucking genocide us. That's what he tried to do. Yes. He succeeded in genociding us. He killed about 20 to 25% of the population last I looked. But yeah, when Henry II came over, he kind of put his boots on Cork's coast and went, all of this, this is mine now.
He was a lovely guy, Henry II, wasn't he? Eleanor of Aquitaine was almost as great, the woman by his side. I mean, good grief. Jeez. If you ever had it...
There'd be no monarchies anymore at all anywhere.
All I would say is if you want a really in-depth look at power behind a throne, just read about Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was really scary. She was really, really scary.
And you see that kind of... to be that level of fucked up as to decide, all of this is mine now, you have to have someone pulling the strings behind you who is like, A, manipulating the shit out of you, and B, just as, if not more, fucked up.
And C, as entitled and as privileged as all fuck to go, you know what, my family's been saying that I have everything I want, therefore I shall have.
Yeah, pretty much. So there was... And a lot of leftists will deny that this was a thing. But during this time, like just after this, not just after Henry II, but like just after, I'm trying to remember my timelines. It wasn't long after Cromwell, I think. I'll have to double check. But there was like 100,000 Irish people sold into slavery.
Yeah. There's a reason why there was an incredibly high level of Irish immigrants in America. It wasn't just because they were escaping the potato. It was they were escaping abject poverty, slavery, and death rates that were unacceptably high.
And starvation, yeah. It was fucking horrendous. And the thing is, like, you tell a leftist, white people have been slaves too, right? And you will get the most bullshit ire.
And you'll get really funny looks as well.
Yeah, you were. But 100,000 Irish people were still sold into slavery. You being uncomfortable about that does not make it less true.
There's a line that my grandfather used to say, never forget this until the day you die. You are one of the first generations to not be one of the long line of serfs in your family.
Yeah. And things like when you're held back economically that hard, is it any wonder that poverty continues? And part of the reason the Catholic Church got so much power in Ireland, like in terms of like social services and stuff, and healthcare, is because when the Irish became a republic, when we became free, we didn't have any money. We had no GDP. We had nothing. And the Catholic Church was there and said, right, we will help you set up these things for social services. We'll help you with healthcare. We'll help you with orphanages. We'll help you with schools, like all this shit.
And they had a lot of politicians that were members of the Catholic establishment to begin with, that were there at the grace of the Catholic Church. So Eamon de Valera was one of those people that was there at the grace of the Catholic Church to begin with, as the first president. As the first president of Ireland, he was there by the grace of the Catholic Church, and
he was the first Taoiseach as well.
He was the first Taoiseach as well, yeah. So yes, he really wasn't a very nice guy. He really, really wasn't a very nice guy whatsoever. But he is laudified and beatified by Irish historians because he was the first. It's like when you look into the history of George Washington. It's like when you look into the history of George Washington. George Washington owned 800 slaves. And it's just like, yeah. But anyway, we are digressing off the
Oh, yeah,
main
sorry. I
topic
could
here.
talk about Irish history until the cows come home.
But I think it does give a good context to the people listening and to the viewers as to the kind of environment that you were brought up with, because a very deep Catholic upbringing is going to be a very oppressive upbringing in terms of the rights of women, the role of women, the rights of LGBT people, the rights to access religions outside of Catholicism, or to access a belief in no religion at all. So
You have to remember, gay marriage wasn't made legal in Ireland until 2018. Abortion wasn't made legal in the Republic of Ireland until 2019.
Mind-blowing just how amazingly late Ireland was to the party. But then Ireland is now going, hang on a minute, we need to do all of these things because, hang on a minute, we haven't been very good at these things. Now Britain's going, hey, they're doing it, let's not bother.
Yeah. Especially with trans people, like...
Yeah, absolutely. But
Ireland, I believe, only has one GIC for the whole country.
It does. It has, but you have to remember that Ireland only has a population of about 4 million, though.
But it's also easier to get to. It's considerably smaller.
Yes.
And like, yeah, they can put others in other places. Eventually, they've only started to roll it out now.
Absolutely.
So give them a chance, see where they're going with it. Because like what we're doing here, we're shutting them down.
It's crazy.
Which is madness. I mean, my options for GIC, I'm in Norfolk. I'm in South Norfolk. My options for GIC would be Nottingham. Bear in mind, I don't drive. So that would
London.
Yeah, Nottingham or London. They are my options. I have been to Nottingham once, as far as the bus station.
You could have. Let's put it this way: a friend of mine went to Nottingham GIC and had James Caspian as their therapist.
I don't know who that is. I probably should, but I don't.
James Caspian is the guy who got thrown out of the University of, I think it was the University of Bath or Bristol, the university beginning with B, because he wanted to set up a detransition study where basically he was going to say, look at all these detransitioners. Everyone that trans is like, secret detransitioner.
God, I hate this place.
He got chucked out of the course and he's now suing the university. Classic GC grift, that.
Yeah, correct. But yeah, like my options would be Nottingham or London. Now, to go to London, it would cost me more than £100 on the train for one way. Plus, you can't do London and Norfolk there and back in a day on the train. You can't do it. So I would also need somewhere to sleep. Hotels in London for cheap, they don't exist. Plus, I'd have to eat. Food prices in London, they're not cheap either.
Unless you plan on staying awake all night long and getting the first train back and hoping that you've got there on like a Friday, so you then get an off-peak train on a Saturday. I feel for you. I really feel for you.
But like even going up to Nottingham, it'd cost me more than £100 one way. And it'd be about 2 hours on the train. And then I wouldn't know how long the appointment would be. And then like I wouldn't get back if I got back at all, depending on what time my appointment was. I wouldn't get back until like stupid o'clock at night, if I could even get back that night. Like, it's madness.
So, the state of the NHS at the moment and the delays in you being able to transition, what exactly is that like for you? How does that affect you, and how does that affect how you view yourself and how other people view you?
So, I have kind of two answers to this, right? People still view me as a woman, which is a problem. It means I can pass as cis in my day-to-day life. It means I don't have to come out to a lot of people I don't want to come out to, because I'm in a heavily Tory area.
Or where you were, because if you then look at that other Norfolk seat, it then flipped to the Lib Dems.
I'm still in a Tory area. This one hasn't flipped. Even then, the Lib Dems aren't much fucking better. They're full of transphobes and all.
Well, yes, but let's put it this way. Out of the three parties, they're the least transphobic.
The Green Party are better.
Shahara Ali, I will shout back at you and go, what the f*** is he all about?
He's a prick, but the Green Party are actively trying to do something about it.
This is true. This is true.
Whereas the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, and the Tories don't give a flying monkeys.
I will grant you that, yes.
At
As
least
somebody
the
who
Green
used to be a
Party
member
are-
of the Liberal Democrats, I am proud not to be a member of the Liberal Democrats anymore.
Yeah, I was a member of the Labour Party under Corbyn. And once Corbyn got kicked out, and I was looking at who was running for leader, the options were Keir Starmer, which is Blairite bastard.
He was a wonderful CPS head, wasn't he? He was a wonderful director of the Crown Prosecution Service.
I mean, genuinely, he actually was. But, like, in terms of the stuff that fell under his remit, he was. The problem is, a lot of people don't actually know what the job of head of the Crown Prosecution Service is and what falls under their remit. So he gets blamed for things like Jimmy Savile not being investigated. That wasn't his fault. The Tory party told Met Police not to investigate.
Absolutely.
You know, like, it's the whole fucking thing. But, like, the options were to vote for leadership elections. Keir Starmer, I don't like lawyers, I don't like Liberals, and I don't like Blairites. Or Rebecca Long Bailey, who, while a leftist, was a Catholic. And with my upbringing and how heavily she leaned into quite a lot of Catholic rhetoric, made my fucking hair stand on end. And it made me really uncomfortable. I was like, right, I'm out. I'm not voting for anyone in this race. I'm done. And I've been politically homeless ever since, because I then, not long after found out I was trans.
Yeah, and I say, as a trans person in the UK, I feel like I look at the parties and I just go, I can't vote for any of you.
Yeah, the only one I could hold my nose and vote for is the Greens.
And it would be a very much, I'm holding my nose to vote for you.
Yeah.
I mean, as wonderful as, I out myself, as wonderful as my MP is, I have the only Green MP. As wonderful as my MP is, I still hold my nose. I still hold my nose and vote for her.
Yeah,
as wonderful as she is, because of what comes with her.
Yeah, I used to live there. I used to live not too far from you.
Well,
I used to live by the hospital, but up the big hill from the hospital.
Oh, I know where you are.
Yeah,
I know exactly where you are.
I used to live in the flats up there.
Oh, did you know?
My step-grandmother, the old person flats that are literally just behind the hospital?
Yes, I do.
My step-grandmother used to live on the top floor in there. And I used to help her with her shopping and stuff down by the Morrisons on St James's Street and what have you.
As I say to everybody, the world is this big and is about 12 people in totality that are just recycled and cloned all over the place.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but yeah, I used to live not too far from you. I do miss it because Brighton is one of the more accepting places in the country. But
I feel like a very privileged trans person to live in the city that I live in. I really do, and that shouldn't be something that I say, because there is still rampant transphobia in Brighton.
Yeah, there is, unfortunately, but at least it's considerably better in Brighton than it fucking is here. My lad was walking to the shop the other day, not even the other day, like a couple of months ago, and he was walking behind this old woman who was talking to her daughter or something, and out of nowhere this woman pipes up, I don't think we should have the transies. I don't think they should be allowed. And he's sitting there going, you fucking what, mate?
Just for context, this is 21st century England in the third decade of the 21st century, where people are saying, I don't think X should exist for no other reason than they exist.
Yeah.
And
it was apropos of nothing as well.
And I mean, it makes me wonder who's going to be the next group when they get bored with trans people.
It'll be it could move from binary trans people to non-binary people specifically, or it could move from binary and non-binary trans people to asexuals and aromantics, or it could move from binary and non-binary trans people to xenogenders.
But this is the thing that I've seen in England, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I wanted to get how this has affected you and affected the way that you raise your own children? Because I'm assuming that you instill tolerance in your children. I would be amazed if you did not instill tolerance in your children. And how do you help your children understand the differences in the setup that you've got in your home? Because they're going to see people that are going to say that there should be a traditional one man, one woman that identifies as a man, identifies as a woman, etc., etc.
So
And
my daughter has a book that my partner got her for Christmas called "She's My Dad." And
I have to say this. Shout out to a friend of mine, Sarah Savage. Shout out to Sarah Savage.
Yeah, my partner bought it for her. And for those who don't know, it is a book about a trans woman, or about a child talking about her dad, who is a trans woman. And it's very much, yeah, and still my dad, still loves me just the same. So, you know, and my daughter really internalized that. And she understands all the concepts. Like, she took it to school to read to her teacher and demonstrate that she understood the concepts and could explain to her teacher that I'm trans. I mean, granted, this meant my 6-year-old daughter outing me to her teacher, but I don't really care. But like the fact that she understands enough to be like, yeah, okay, and is really impressive and important. She's also like, she's super supportive of her brother no matter what. Like, there was a point not long ago, just after she started school, where she was like, well, boys can't wear dresses, you know. And me and her dad sort of sat down like, well, why not? They're for girls, they're girls' clothes. What makes them girls' clothes? Well, girls wear them. So boys wear trousers. You like wearing trousers sometimes, don't you? Yeah. So why can't boys like wearing dresses and skirts? Oh, that's a good point. And now, like, if her little brother wants to borrow one of her dresses to play dress up, she's like, here you go, Drew, you can put that on. You know, and there's no problem, like, at all. It's also like, I've had her come home, like, spouting Christian propaganda. I've had her come home spouting racism, just because of the shit that other kids say that they've heard from their parents. And it's always like a sit-down conversation of, okay, just because someone looks different doesn't mean that's bad. No two people are ever the same, you know? And it's something that has to, like, be repeated over and over again because she is only 6. But it is, like, it's slowly instilling these things in her. And, you know, it's going to be the same for my son as he gets older.
A slightly more esoteric question here. How has your upbringing of your children in relation to your own gender identity affected any of the relationships you had with the other parents at the school where your children go
What
to?
relationships? My other half does the drop-offs and the pickups because I am, more times than not, too uncomfortable.
That answers that question then. That answers that question.
I will not interact with the other parents because it's just trying to put it into words. It's like, you know, when you get a sudden really bad stab of gender dysphoria in like a specific place. It's like that, but all over, all at once, and it kind of sets off a panic in the back of my brain. And I can't even explain why, because I can't put into words why that's a thing. It doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, fuck.
Take your time. If you're not comfortable, we can move on to a different
I'm
area.
comfortable. I'm just trying to put the feelings into words is always something I struggle with. It's always something that's a little bit tough for me to do sometimes, like with certain things. So it's like the idea of going and like building relationships with these parents on false pretenses, because I know that 9 of them out of 10 will hate me merely for my existence. It just, it's deeply unsettling. And I've not long come out. I don't want to make friends that I have to then go back in the closet for. You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
That's not a thing that I want to do. And like, I don't want to get to that point where I'm constantly uncomfortable and angry and frustrated because I'm surrounded by these people all the time that cannot stand me for who I am. And I get to a point where I either end up lashing out at the kids or in front of the kids. Because that's not fair on them. My issues are not their issues. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because the act of coming out is one of those things which is very challenging in a sense, not only for yourself, but it can be very challenging in a sense of what journey do you want to go on with how you have come out and how you're coming out. And where is it that you want to see your journey of you coming out, and where do you want your journey to end up?
Yeah, and like very much being trans is coming out and then coming out again and then coming out again and then coming out like constantly throughout your whole life as you meet new people, right? And because I can't transition, a lot of my coming out, and this is really dumb, a lot of my coming outs feel like a lie. Because I cannot do anything to pursue the goal of appearing to be, like appearing to the outside to be a man.
And is appearing to the outside world as a man your ultimate end goal?
I would like it to be, but at this point, practically, I don't know if it can
be. So, what changes would you like to see either in your life or in general that would make things for you more accomplishable in that regard?
Finances. Genuinely, like mostly it's a finances problem. If I could get to a point where my streaming like really does properly take off, I'm about a 20 viewer Andy average now. But if I could get to a point where I could hit partner and my streaming really takes off and I have like a couple of hundred subs coming in every month, like that's kind of the ideal, because then I can be at a point where I can clear all my bills and I can clear all my debts and I can start going, okay, what do I want to do? Because like the next big thing I want to do is buy a house for housing stability. Like giving my children everything they need is more important than giving me what I need, as far as I'm concerned. Like even if that is transitional. So I want to get to a point where I can put down like a deposit on my house and I can buy a house to make sure that like my kids will always have somewhere that is theirs, that is like a roof over their head, that they never have to be worried about being kicked out of. And the thing is, like, once I get to that point where the deposit's down, we're moving into our own house, then I can start thinking about, okay, do I start testosterone? Because making sure my family are cared for and stable and safe has to be a bigger priority, because I have these responsibilities. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
They didn't ask to be born. I cannot leave them in a situation where they could theoretically be
vulnerable.
Vulnerable, and they could go without because I've decided to get testosterone that month instead of paying them rent.
Or buying food.
Yeah.
And
that's not fair.
That is one of the most... I want to use the only word in the English language that I can use is commendable, but it doesn't portray adequately what I want to portray, because it's a much stronger, deeper feeling that I want to portray there, because it is putting yourself second to people who have no choice in the situation. And the only word in the English language is commendable. If anyone can come up with a better word, please let me know what this better word is. But that's the only one I can come up with at the moment. And hearing that always makes there's something inside me that is lit up. The campfire got a little bit stronger inside me hearing that, because it shows just how selfless this is for some individuals, and just how desperately difficult it is
That's what
for
parenting
those.
should be.
Absolutely. As my mother said, parenting shouldn't be easy. If it's easy, there's something that's not quite right. It's supposed to be a little bit difficult.
You are supposed to be up all hours of the day and night, pulling your hair out and shouting yourself hoarse because your children are doing the thing you told them 800 times not to do that day alone. Whether that's painting on the walls, or throwing cat biscuits all over the place, or pouring cat water all over the place, or dunking their juice on the floor, or spitting their juice, or bullying each other, or pulling
or taking a crayon and running down the wall with it.
Yeah, or pulling the cat's tails, or trying to give the dog chocolate, like putting toys in the toilet, like. And I'm sorry, but there is never a funnier phrase than "Why is there Lego in the toilet?" When you're a parent, there just never is.
Why is there Lego ... should be a new series of memes or something.
Yeah. And it should be accompanied with this. Oh.
With the
because that is 99% of parenting. But yeah, like that's what parenting is, right? It is shouting at your kid and then apologizing because you realize you overreacted. It's not eating some days so that they can. If you are in that financial position, it's making sure the power stays on and the heat stays on so that like she can be warm and clothed and fed to go to school. It's working. Like for me, it's starting my days at 6 o'clock in the morning and then going until 2 o'clock in the morning the next morning. Like they're my whole days, to make sure that all the bills are paid and they can eat properly and they get everything they need, and to make sure that she can always have like fresh uniform when she grows out of some, or fresh shoes or whatever, and he can have packed lunches and things. Like kids aren't fucking cheap.
No.
And being a disabled person with the mental health issues I have, I can't work like a standard 9 to 5. So I have to motivate myself and work in my own way. And the way I have to do that is sitting here now, surrounded by 4 monitors, from when they go to bed until about 2 o'clock in the morning. Unless I have to be up extra early because I have an appointment the next day, like tomorrow.
And I do thoroughly appreciate you taking the time to sit down and come on my show and share what is a very important story. And that is parenting, and parenting as a trans person. Because too many times in the UK, particularly in the UK, you hear that trans people aren't fit to be parents. Trans people are predators. Trans people are the recycled homophobic slur from the 1980s.
Yeah,
the recycled.
I am a better parent than any of these cunts combined.
And the love that I see from every trans person that I know that is a parent, and the love that I can feel that you are expressing for your children, means that being trans has nothing to do with your ability to be a parent, has nothing to do with whether you're a good human being or a bad human being. It just is a part of who you are. And your children still love you, you still love your children, and you just want the best for your children. And it enrages me every time I hear somebody turn around to me and say that I shouldn't be a parent, or that someone else shouldn't be a parent, or someone else is an unfit parent, or that I will fail the day that I become a parent. Because the one thing I want in my life is to have a child at some point in my life. I'm not in a position to do that at the moment. But I, as a trans woman, am no better and no worse at being a parent than anyone else. And hearing your story today, Alex, just reinforces that it is a load of hogwash, nonsense, bullshit, and transphobia every time somebody opens their mouth and says trans person X is Y because they are trans. And that Y is usually a negative slur like paedophile, predator, sex pest, danger to women. And it has to stop sometime. It just has to stop.
I often get assumed as a trans woman as opposed to a trans man. And because obviously I'm a fab, quite a convincing trans woman.
AFAB, because you're fabulous.
Because I never get the you're a predator or you'll never pass or any of this shit. They try the you'll never be a woman bollocks, right? And I laugh at them as like, yeah, no shit, that's the point. And then they just resort to slurs because they're very boring. And it's like, okay, these are things I call myself, and what of it? Like, what? It's like, you're an F-slur. It's like, okay, and? You're a T-slur. Yes, correct again, and? Like, you expect me to be offended by accuracies?
Yeah, it is amazing the level of bubble that has been lived within by the people who are attacking trans people today.
Yeah.
And it has to end eventually because you're going nowhere, I'm going nowhere, the trans people in my chat are going nowhere, the trans people in your chat are going nowhere, the allies to trans people are hopefully going nowhere. And guess what? You are a parent and you are exhibiting the love that any parent should exhibit to their children. And that is the only thing a child should ever know is love from their parents. The child should never worry. It's the parent that should worry, and the child should never know that the parent is worrying.
Yeah, like, I've seen the neglect firsthand. I've seen, like, from the other end. I've seen, like, parents struggling for money and had that stress put on them. Like, especially after my dad left, there was me, my little brother, my big brother, and my mum, and I ended up being the one that went out to work. I ended up being the one that took care of the house and paid the bills and went to school, and I started working very, very young because I was suddenly thrust into a point where I had a family to care for at 14. Like, my dad left at 12. I had a family to care for very, very young. And we sort of muddled through for a little bit, and then I was like, shit, dad's gone into a depression and stopped paying mum, so now I have an entire family to care for at 14. And I didn't have a fucking choice. So I don't ever want to put my kids in the position where they feel that they need to go do that for me and their dad. Because that, I know how much that fucked me up. I ended up a heroin addict. I ended up an alcoholic, like very, very young for both of those. I quit heroin at 16 and I'd already been addicted for 2 years. Like, it was grim. I was an alcoholic for most of my teenage years. I was having a lot of casual sex from a very young age. But I was going out and partying and then going and doing my exams and then immediately going to work and then maybe going home if I had the time. Like, my entire teenage years was like non-teenagehood, really, because it was, you have to suddenly be a tiny adult. Yeah, so I didn't have the time to do what a lot of teenagers did. Like, I didn't go to my prom, I didn't like go to my formals, like none of that shit. I was like, I don't have time for this. I have too much to do. And you know, I was working and I was doing the shit I had to do. I was like bringing home the bread and making sure the bills were paid, and I was going to school and I was playing sport and I was looking after my family. And then my eldest brother's excuse me, my eldest brother's toddlers moved in with us for a little while. On top of all this shit. And which muggins ended up looking after him? This one. Which muggins was up doing night feeds and up early in the morning and doing bum changes and what have you and what have you and what have you, and then going out to work? Yeah, me. And the only reason my mom took them in the first place, which we didn't have a choice to do, they'd have ended up in care otherwise, was because I said, I will do this. Because my mother couldn't be bothered. And it was something else I took over onto my plate because my niece and nephew needed help. And you know what really fucking stings about all of this? My brother's ex-girlfriend is fucking mental. She is a malicious, manipulative, delusional little cow. And she will actively try and poison her children against our family. Her eldest son already ran away and fucked off to become a drug dealer because he'd had enough of her fucking abuse. And she is now fucking up the two youngest. And she's acting like she has Munchausen by proxy at the moment. And it's very disturbing. I did all of this shit for their kids. I haven't seen either of those kids since I was 18. That is now 11 years. They don't know their cousins. My kids don't know their cousins on my side of the family at all. Because my family are malicious bastards. There is a reason that I am mostly alone, and this is why.
But are you at peace with yourself and who you are?
Yeah, I don't give a fuck anymore. I know who I am. I'm okay with who I am. Do I think I'm a good person? Absolutely fucking not. Do I think I try? Yeah. That's good enough. I put my kids first and I try to be decent. And does that mean I will sit there and argue with you until the cows come home if you're being a prick? Absolutely.
And that, I think, is a good way to round off our conversation tonight. So, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with the audiences that we have with us tonight about your story that we have gone through tonight?
I've got a few, particularly for the cis people listening.
More than welcome.
Because the
floor
trans
is all
people already
yours.
know this. So this one is particularly for the cis people. Stop treating trans people like we're a fucking monolith. And stop expecting us to look a certain way just because we identify a certain way. Yes, I am a trans guy. I use he, they fucking pronouns. Do I look like a dude? Absolutely not. But you know what? Fuck gender roles. Fuck gender expectations and fuck stereotypes. Fuck it, because all of it is useless, especially when you live in a country where not only do they want to deny us healthcare, but they actively want to fucking genocide us. Number one. Number two, stop telling trans people they can't be parents. Stop telling leftists they shouldn't be parents. Let people make their own fucking decisions. It's their own damn bodies and their own damn lives. Mind your own damn business. Third, for English and American people particularly leftists, stop saying white equals oppressor, because that's not fucking true. Go look up actual fucking history, particularly European history, before America was even a thing, and even just after it was, and they'll tell me white people were never fucking oppressed. Stop putting an American view of racism on fucking everywhere else, because it's not the same.
And I'd just like to say something on that point. I am of Jewish ethnicity. And to try to tell me that my ethnic group has not been a victim of racism is one of the most offensive things I can ever hear come out of your mouth.
Yeah, exactamente. That's the thing. Like, a lot of people can't tell if you're Jewish, especially if you're European Jewish. Because you look the damn same as all the rest of us.
Yeah.
We all look the same. That's okay. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean we're not a diverse group. It doesn't mean there's not different ethnicities. I'm a gypsy. Can you tell that looking at me? Absolutely fucking not.
So, on today's stream, for those of you who are listening, a Jew has interviewed a gypsy.
Yes. I am an Irish.
Could you tell? Could you tell at the start? Could you make any difference, or did you just think this was two privileged white people sitting on YouTube and Twitch talking about this privileged ivory tower that is being trans? No, you couldn't. But I am Jewish, and Alex is a gypsy, and we have just sat here as two members of a white minority.
Nope. And quite frankly, I am sick to my back teeth of all the fucking pearl-clutching, purity-testing bollocks you get on the left on the internet. The last thing I will say, have conversations. If you have the spoons, have conversations. You will not change anybody's mind, particularly about things like trans people and our deservings of rights, if you sit inside your echo chamber and your little safe space all the time. It doesn't work. Now, if you don't have the spoons, I get it. It's fucking hard work. I understand. I do it. I do it because I know there are so many other trans people out there who can't. So if you're one of the people who can, have those conversations, because the best way to change someone's mind, particularly if they are transphobic, is to introduce them on a personal level to a trans person and just sit down and have a conversation. Because you know what that does? It fucking humanizes us. It makes them realize that actually our goals, our drives, our wants, our likes, our dislikes, they're not that fucking different. And I would much rather stand hand in hand with someone who calls me a fucking T-slur, but wants me to have rights, than with someone who uses the right language, but would chuck me under the bus.
And on that note, it has been a wonderful conversation with you. I would like to say that this is a stream that is also got a very serious ending to it as well. So tonight's stream is dedicated to Sophie Bothas, who passed away recently. And tonight's stream is dedicated to the memory of Sophie Bothas.
Sophia, if you don't mind, Sophia was a very, very good friend of mine. She was a trans woman and also Jewish. She was disabled as well and never let any of that stop her. She went to every single protest in London, even like over the last several years. She interviewed people. She went on streams to have conversations with people. She would never back down from the challenge, and she never wouldn't call anyone out. She had a wonderful blog that I would like to link in both chats. If I just pull it up for a minute.
So if you are one of my moderators and you are also in Alex's chat, could you please post the link in my Twitch and in my YouTube, because that would be very much appreciated. It's always sad when you lose a member of the community, and it's always sad when you lose somebody that's been taken from this earth far too early. But whilst I did not know Sophia, I recognize her picture and I recognize her name. And to have that impact on somebody who did not know you in a positive sense means that you have done good in this world.
What makes me really angry is that so she died of a pulmonary embolism, which, as you all know, is a common side effect of HRT. Yeah. But she was triple vaccinated, and it's very likely that it was exacerbated by COVID or sped up by COVID, despite being triple vaccinated. So even with COVID, even with her immuno issues, she never didn't go to a fucking protest. She never didn't stand up for us.
And what I would like to say to everybody who has been here tonight, this has been a very informative and not one of my laughing, happy, jokey conversations, because it's important to understand that not every conversation is going to be that laughing, happy, fun ending. And I would like to thank Alex for giving the time tonight to come on to my channel. I'd like to thank Alex for letting me do the interview and exploring some of the very challenging things that we have. And if you have any last words that you'd like to say, the floor is yours for a couple of seconds.
No, I think I'm good, unless any of your chat or anything has questions that they'd like to ask me or anything, or if they want to on anything I want earlier in more detail or anything.
I haven't got any explicit questions from my chat. So, Alex, where can people find you in case people want to migrate over to watch you and watch you on your social medias?
Thank you. I'm actually on YouTube as Lexiibat. You can just search and I should pop up, but I don't have like a personal URL yet because I'm not at 100 subscribers. It always bloody takes time, doesn't it? You can find me on twitch.tv/Lexiibat, Lexiibat. I'm on Twitter as @Lexiibat_Twitch, all one word, and Instagram ditto.
And I have been Phoebe J. Rose, and this has been Season 3, Episode 5 of Transition Stories. I have been interviewing Alex, also known as Lexiibat. This has been a joint production of Odd Tech Man and Phoebe J. Rose. And as I say, at the end of all of these, you only get one life. So make damn sure you live the best life that you certainly can. To all of the people that have been here tonight, thank you ever so much for coming. To all of my moderators, thank you ever so much. And to my producer, thank you ever so much. But the biggest thank you tonight goes to you, Alex. And I wish you all the best. And until next time, campfire gatherers, stay safe.